You've built a great liability case. The jury believes the defendant made a negligent choice that caused harm to the plaintiff. They get it. But then you switch to damages. You start talking about medical bills, lost wages, pain and suffering, and the energy in the room changes. The jurors who were leaning forward are now sitting back. They were angry, and now if they are even paying attention, they're trying to do math in their heads. You didn't lose the case, you lost the connection to the defendant's choice. And that connection is where the money lives. Over 20 years, I've tried more than 40 plaintiff personal injury cases. In this video, I'm going to show you how to tell if your liability and damages themes are disconnected and why that's costing you verdicts, how to connect them into one narrative that makes the damages feel like the inevitable consequence of the defendant's choice, and I'll show you the 3 mistakes that break that connection even when everything else is good. The third mistake is the one I see most often, and it's the one most likely to cut your verdict in half. So your liability theme should answer, what did the defendant do? Your damages theme has to answer, what did that choice cost? Not medical cost, human costs. When you put these together, what they did plus what it took away, you have your complete story. When these two halves are connected, damages don't feel like asking for money. They feel like the natural, inevitable consequence of the choice you've already proven. But when they're disconnected, damages feel like a separate argument. And jurors treat separate arguments with separate and increased skepticism. Let me show you what the disconnect looks like, because you might be doing it and not even realize it. Let's take a rear-end collision, distracted driver. Your liability theme is solid. He chose his phone over the road. But then you get to damages and you say something like, well, Sarah has a herniated disc at L4, L5. She's undergone 12 months of physical therapy. Her medical bills total $87,000. She can no longer perform her job as a dental hygienist. Now, every word of that is true. It's well documented and supported by the experts. But it sounds like it could have come from any case. The liability theme was about a choice, a story about a man who decided his phone mattered more than the road. The jury was feeling something. Then the damages became a spreadsheet. Bills, dates, body parts. The emotion evaporated. Now, I remember making this mistake with 2 young plaintiffs. The jury found that the defendant had caused them both a permanent injury, multiple lumbar herniations. But then it gave them each $7,500. I was frustrated. It seemed like worse than a loss, a huge missed opportunity. So I went back and analyzed what I did wrong, and I realized that I presented damages as something completely disconnected from liability. When your damages presentation doesn't connect back to the liability theme, the jury stops feeling and just starts calculating and trying to think of what the right number is. And juries that calculate give smaller numbers than juries that just feel justice and get angry at the defendant. Here's how you know you have it wrong. If you could swap out your liability story and the damages section would still work exactly the same way, then they're disconnected. The way you present damages should only make sense because of this defendant's choice, not just any injury. This injury caused by this choice. Now, if you want a step-by-step system for building a connected narrative and theme, I can help you out with that. Check out the links in the description below for some of my free resources. So how do you make the jury feel damages as the consequence of a defendant's choice and not a separate argument? Let's take the same case, same facts, but watch what happens when the themes connect. Your liability theme again is he chose his phone over the road. Now, instead of switching to a damages spreadsheet reading, you carry that same thread forward. That 5-second choice took something from Sarah that money can't fully replace. She spent 15 years becoming a dental hygienist. She was good at it. Her patients liked and trusted her. And now, because he chose to look down at his phone for a few seconds, she can't hold her instruments for more than 20 minutes without pain. Do you feel the difference in how those two are presented? The damages aren't a separate argument or a spreadsheet of medical issues. They're what his choice cost. The 5-second choice, 15 years of career building. One destroyed the other. The jury doesn't need to switch gears. They're still in the same story, and more importantly, still in the same mindset. Now, there's no magic here. It's all the same information. It's just the way you deliver it that changes. Instead of, and also here are the damages, it's because of that choice, here's what she lost. The damages theme should be the natural consequence of the liability theme. Just a new chapter, a continuation, the same story seen from the other side of the choice. So how do you build this connection? Well, first you take your liability theme, the choice the defendant made, and ask yourself, What specific thing did that choice take away? Start with the most egregious. Make that loss concrete and personal, not medical, not legal, but human. Connect them with language that carries the thread through. Language like that choice took, or because he did this, or his rushing cost her this. It's actually a pretty simple thing to do, but if you don't do it, you lose that connection. All you have to do is add that connecting language, the because statements, and you have a much different presentation to the jury. It creates this psychological effect with the jurors where they now see the damages as a result of the defendant's negligence and not just something that happened. So let me show you how this works in other case types, like a slip and fall. The liability theme is they knew the floor was dangerous and walked away. Your damages presentation can be, because they walked away, Maria couldn't. She hasn't walked without pain since the day they decided a wet floor wasn't their problem. How about a trucking case? Your liability theme is the company chose speed over safety. Damages theme is their shortcut cost James the one thing he can't get back, the ability to pick up his daughter and hold her for more than a few seconds without pain. Now, you see the pattern? It is pretty simple. The liability choice creates the loss. The damages are the cost of that choice. One continuous story. So you've got the formula now, you know how to connect them, but there are 3 mistakes that can break that connection, even when your individual damages themes are strong. Mistake number 1, you deliver a powerful opening with a connected liability and damages story. The jury's with you, then your medical expert takes the stand, and they talk about disc herniations and nerve impingement and functional capacity evaluations for 45 minutes maybe, in their medical language, with zero connection to the defendant's choice. The jury just heard a different case, a medical case, not a case about justice. Now, how you fix this is pretty simple. Before your expert gets into the nitty-gritty of their testimony, reconnect that choice. Ask one question that ties the medicine back to the story. Doctor, you've reviewed Sarah's injuries. Can you tell the jury what happened to her body as a result of this rear-end collision? You don't want him to just get right into describe the herniation or explain the MRI. What happened to her body because of this? Keep the because thread alive throughout the expert's testimony. Far too often I see attorneys ask the causation question just as an afterthought, like they're checking a box rather than creating a narrative. They know that they have to get causation testimony from their experts, so they just make sure they get it at the end. Weave it throughout the testimony of your expert instead. Mistake number 2, you get all the way to closing, you've done everything right so far, and then you say something like, well, the evidence shows $87,000 in medical bills, $45,000 in lost wages, and if you're in a jurisdiction that allows you to name a number, you say, we're asking for $300,000 in pain and suffering. You just went back to the spreadsheet. Right at the moment when the jury's supposed to feel the full weight of everything that's happened. Here's how you fix this. Every number in closing should be preceded by the choice that caused it. Not the medical bills are $87,000. Instead, you say $87,000. That's what it cost to try to undo what 5 seconds of looking at a phone did to this woman's spine. The number isn't the argument. The choice that caused it is the argument. The number is just the price tag. Now, the third mistake is probably the most dangerous one, and it's subtle. The defense wants your liability and damages to be 2 separate arguments, because if they're separate, the jury can believe liability, but still lowball damages. They'll do this by conceding liability early. They'll say things like, well, we're not here to say our client didn't make a mistake. We're just here to talk about reasonable compensation. The moment the defense concedes liability and shifts to only damages, they've cut your story in half. Now the jury isn't thinking about a choice and its cost. They're thinking about a medical dispute. This happens all the time in auto cases with clear liability, like a rear-end hit. The defense will concede liability and hope that it takes some of the emotion out of your case. Don't let them get away with this. If you don't think they're going to call the defendant to the stand in their case, then you do it in yours. Just because they conceded liability doesn't mean you can't question them about the accident. Things like the impact are still relevant, how it happened, the severity of it. And then in closing, refuse to let them separate. Make sure you tell the jury, they want to separate what he did from what it cost. But you don't have to do that, because the reason Sarah is hurting isn't a medical mystery. It's that this man chose his phone over the road. When you present it, the cost isn't a number. It's the consequence of a choice. So now you know how to connect your liability and damages themes into one story. You've got the formula, you know what breaks it and what to look out for. But what if the jury isn't buying your liability theme at all? If that happens, then connecting it to damages is useless. But there's a way that you can almost guarantee that your liability theme will land with the specific jurors that are sitting right there in your jury box. In fact, I made a video about it explaining how to do this. So if you want to know that technique, then watch this video next.